Off top, Memorial Day was originally known as Decoration Day. Play the music.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.
Welcome to the Domonique Foxworth Show. I'm joined, as usual, by my phenomenal co-host, flashing them knees today. Charlie the Snack Kravitz trying to get them mentions popping. I see you showing them sexy knees with the shorts on.
A little thigh.
Oh, some white
thigh.
Some white thigh.
It's so bad.
It's very pale, brother.
It's so bad.
Look like you got a compression short.
It's unbelievable. You should see the sock tan.
Oh, good for you. Summer is here. It's hot as hell this week. I spent so much time at a track meet, and I am a new track dad. This is only my second club track meet, and there's got to be a better way. There has got to be a better way. I've been to 2 track meets, and they both have been horribly long, and I can only imagine, what if your kid stinks? You got to stay there all day to watch them get cooked? It's awful.
That's when you need to have the dose of reality. The dose of reality that I got around age 12 was just have fun playing sports.
I guess, to be fair, I think a lot of them are track parents, so they become, there's like a community, and it's really like, it's probably pretty fun to be out all day on a hot day, and I'm sure people got some flasks, they got some drinks, they got some food. It's a pretty cool thing, but I don't know nobody. Well, actually, that's the thing. It's also my demo, baby.
Yeah.
It is also track dads. Oh, track dads love Foxworth Friday. Track dads love morning sports shows. Yeah, a lot of pats on the backs, and they're like really respectful. Where it's like they won't come bother you. Just it's like a little extra.
But they aren't calling you young blood. It's just tell them what you got, what they got to hear.
I get a lot of young bloods too. It's because it's I think that it becomes like you become a part of that community. So there are people there who like run the event that are older guys. But yeah, it's still a lot of telling what you got to hear. It's a lot of young blood. I appreciate the track dads, but I mean, there's got to be a better way. We were out there, and so the early kids go at like, the 5-year-olds start at like 7 a.m.
Oh my God.
And they go until like midday, and we're supposed to get there at 11. We get there at 11. Avery's first event isn't till like 3.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what are we doing? And the coaches are very serious about you got to get there.
Really long dynamic warm up.
Oh my gosh, it's a whole long thing. And then there was a lightning, so we had to end it. And we didn't even get to the end of it. And it's 8 o'clock when we're leaving. We got there at 11.
Damn.
And there was still
8's long.
There was
9
still
hours
more track
long.
to go. It's absurd. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. We got lots of other things to talk about. But yeah, she's getting good and she loves it.
We're going to start with some dads who are probably not track dads.
Transition that thing.
It's the Boston Celtics and the Boston Celtics fans. I mean, there's been so much banter about this Celtics team that keeps on winning and the way they look, the way it's not impressive, the way the 64-win team with first-team All-NBA Jason Tatum and All-NBA snub Jaylen Brown and a team that could have 5 All-Stars isn't winning by enough. And they played a Pacers team in Game 3 that was missing Tyrese Halliburton. The Celtics did not play great in the first half, were phenomenal in the second half. They're going to the NBA Finals. They're up 3-0 in the Eastern Conference Finals. Their net rating, their offense, their defense has been historically good. And this is leading me to a question that I think is bigger than just us roasting how unimpressive they look. We've seen 6 different NBA champions in the last 6 years, and a lot of them have been related to injuries in other series, dips in play, weird level ups from players. And we never really asterisk it because we shouldn't. Like, the people who win. And so, just kicking this forward in the hypothetical, what will you think of this Celtics team if they win the title?
So I know you're offended by the concept of asterisking anybody's title, and I think I am also.
Yeah.
However, I think it's fair to think of different titles as having different value.
Definitely.
Being different levels of impressiveness. And right now, they've had the star player in the series of the opponent in every series so far go down. Also, the teams were weaker to start with, and they have, despite the fact that they've only had 2 losses so far in the playoffs, it still felt unimpressive. So intellectually, I look at their numbers and I'm like, hey, this team is special. But then when I watch these games, I get frustrated, and I'm not a fan. I texted you that the other day. It was like, I'm not a fan of this team, and I'm mad at them.
You sounded like my dad.
It was so, because it's just like, I don't know. I want to say you're playing with your food, but it doesn't even look like that. It's like you're playing down to your competition. But then you look at the final score, not of that game necessarily, but the final scores of most of their games. They handle these teams. They beat them quite handily. But I do think that the perception of the value of the title is going to largely depend on how they look in the finals. If they dominate in the finals, I think we have to, even those of us who are hesitant to treat them like the dominant team that they've been so far.
Yeah.
If they dominate that finals, we have to say they're just better than everyone else. I think some people will be like, well, they're rested. They weren't tested. But I think after all, a few years from now, or even next year, we'll be like, hey, they just were just better than everyone else. It wouldn't have mattered what happened on the Eastern Conference or the Eastern side of the NBA.
So there's one thing that a couple parts to this. The first one is what happens next year.
Yeah,
I think is essential in this because I'm not making this comparison, but when the 2015 Warriors won the title, they faced an injured point guard in every single round of the playoffs. In the finals, LeBron went up 2-1 on them, but he was playing without Kyrie, without Kevin Love. They ran out of gas. They lost, and people for a minute were like, maybe the Cavs would have won that title if they were healthy. But then we were all like, you know what? This is the start of something. This is the start of an actual dynasty. And the Celtics have been on this 7-year build of being incredibly good, and there is some continuity. But the team that I actually think they're the most like is sort of the 04 Pistons, which is a title we bestowed on the Wolves really quickly because of how defensively.
But to be fair to you, you've been saying that the Celtics were the 04 Pistons since the regular season. So I think you're right about that, the strength and numbers of it all.
And it's just we aren't accustomed since the decision to have a team that doesn't have a traditional superstar winning the title. And by traditional superstar, it's not a slight at Jason Tatum. It's the fact that he doesn't score as easily in the ways that we are accustomed to superstar scoring, even though his effect on the games, he's averaging 30 points a game in this series. He's just
locked down on defense.
Yeah, he's an incredible defensive player, but he doesn't seem to elevate the offense in ways that seem familiar, the way that a Luka, LeBron, Steph.
He
Durant.
seems like, this team, I think you started to get close to a thought that I had is that they are also a victim of their own success. And I think I talk about how the stories develop for players often. And because they've been the more talented team that's lost a couple times, and because they achieved so much so early, I think we've run out of storyline for them. And they're not giving us the only proper storyline for them now is just to plow through everybody and be decidedly the best team, despite the fact that their stats suggest that when anybody watches a game, which is the weirdest thing, I've yet to hear very many people say, because everyone who wants to say that they're a dominant team points to the stats and the results, but no one's ever did you see when they did this or how they handled, it feels not dominant. I don't know the right word to all of us.
Yeah, and style of play. Yeah. Style of play is so important to becoming it in basketball in particular. No one thinks about teams that win ugly the way that teams who win with beautiful basketball play. There's no avant-garde aspect of the Celtics where you're this is artistic, but they're awesome.
They are awesome. I picked them before the playoffs started to win the title, and then I stuck with that pick after round one, and I want to stick with that pick, but and I think that's probably why they annoy me, is because I'm guys, I'm right. Make me right. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I do think that the major point is, which is not fair, but it's what happens in the finals. Assuming they win in the finals with some level of control and there's like an injury, a major injury on the other side. But I think more than any of that, it matters what they do next year.
Yeah.
They kind of have to go back to back.
or just be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you lose to in a duel where I don't know, Giannis or someone goes crazy.
Yeah, I guess the Nuggets would be a version that we could look at to see that, and it doesn't feel like the Nuggets were awesome.
Yeah,
and they lost in the Game 7 against a good opponent, and I don't think that it's it hasn't taken anything away from the way we perceive them. But had they won, we'd be talking about them a lot different, talking about Jokic and that team a lot differently.
Or if they had gotten swept like it looked after Game 2.
Yeah.
It would have been, the discussion would have been really ugly. I think that it's weird. This team it might just be the way that this team plays.
Yeah. Not might.
Yeah.
It is. It's kind of how they play. It's kind of, and that's to the point that you were saying about Jason Tatum not being like a traditional superstar. He is in the way that the team takes on his personality to some degree, and the team kind of feels like Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
Like they're really great, but it don't look that tough. It don't look that impressive. It doesn't look that special. And occasionally there's a flash of some awesome defensive play or great long-range shot. But it's just like, hey, be better than them. And then they rely on, it seems like.
Jump shooting.
Yeah, they rely on jump shooting. But when they recognize we got to get to the basket and play aggressively, they rely on Jaylen Brown, who we all looked at last year and was like, hey, or not last year before last, and like, hey, man, learn how to dribble with your other hand.
He's been great in the postseason.
He has been, but it just doesn't feel right. And I think that's the point you're making at the beginning about the traditional star is we would have a much easier time telling the story of this team if we could say, you know what, Jason Tatum took a leap.
Yeah.
Jason Tatum's taking over, and that would feel different about the way we would talk about this team.
It's just so funny because we have all these I'm saying the royal we in sports media have all these complaints about the way the Celtics win, and they're doing it without Porzingis, a guy who is an all-star. An all-star in our league. Can I say our league?
Sure. We're talking about it enough.
He was an all-star in our league, and he's been a 20-point scorer. He's a rim protector. He's a super unique player. They want to play 5 out.
And he was the key.
Yeah.
That was like the big move that they made this offseason. And while we're talking about how all the teams they're playing against don't have their stars, they don't have the third best player. Or maybe their most important player second most, not more than Tatum, but their second most important player based on the way that they want to play with a real athletic rim protector that can also shoot.
It's just so funny too. Like I genuinely despise people who try and relitigate some of these old titles. Whether it's like even if you go back and it's like, oh, the Nuggets didn't beat a 50-win team, or the year before it's like, well, the Warriors got a cakewalk because they got to play an 8 seed in the finals, or the year before if you're like, well, Giannis had all of these injuries, and the year before you're like, oh, it's the bubble. Well, that one might be the closest one to it, but other than that, the Raptors over the injured Warriors the year before. Then we got to disregard the Durant titles because of the cap smoothing. It was so unfair. Yeah, then we have to disregard the title before because Draymond punched LeBron in the like, how far back are we going to go? I
love this rant. Just keep it going. Go as far back as you can remember.
And then 2015, there were the injuries to the to the Cavs.
Yeah. You think Rick Carlisle heard the basketball players debate? Because he ended that game with what obviously looked like a football play to get Nesmith that open-ish jumper.
Yes.
Look, he ran the hell out that route. I think he could play.
Should we pivot to someone who actually might have had a better future in football than basketball?
Oh, your transition game is on point.
Bronny James.
Oh, yeah. At 6'1".
6'1", 210.
Oh,
super athletic.
Makes too much money to fool around with
That's exactly right.
Make this basketball thing work.
So the Bronny thing, it's continuing to pick up steam.
Yeah.
I mean, you have scouts being like he's not an NBA player.
Yeah.
You have mock drafts putting him anywhere from 22 to the Suns to try and lure LeBron. Dallas being interested, the Lakers being interested. I think he's at 54 in the ESPN mock draft with Cavoni. You know, there's value in second-round picks. They can turbocharge a build in ways that are really unique. And we just look at them as trash that you can throw away on any sort of prospect or any sort of stash. Would it be foolish for a team to spend a second-round pick on Bronny?
So, I mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Legler had something with JJ Redick about this that made sense, and there's a lot of information about the new salary cap, the new CBA that makes second round picks a lot more valuable than they have been in the past because you can get extensions, a way to go outside the cap and not use your mid level. You can also add more two-way players. Like it just expands your opportunity at hitting. So essentially, throwing away a second round pick is throwing away a lottery ticket.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't think he can play, then drafting him is just flat out wasteful and dumb because the only reason to take him, which is I'm not going to pretend like I'm a draft analyst and I'm not going to project what Bronny can do. So we can take it from two perspectives. If you think he is a lottery ticket worth taking because you think he can grow into something, then by all means, you can draft him. If that's your honest assessment. If you're drafting him not knowing whether you're going to get LeBron or not to lure LeBron in, that to me feels like a wasted pick. And the third option is you already know LeBron is coming. If you draft him, then hell yeah. And it seems like a straightforward decision. If I was Bronny, I would hate that idea. And like I would hate everything about this whole situation, which I guess some bad comes with all good. There's plenty more positive as being LeBron James Jr. than negative. But this, for him, this whole thing has to suck.
I mean, there have been some second-round picks that have been like, obviously they're the outliers. They're the Jokic's, et cetera, who you find in the second round and they turn into stars. But that's even beyond an outlier. But like throwing away that ticket when there are these new CBA rules which make it so hard to add talent seems a little bit silly. What'd you think of Rich Paul's interview? Not him being like, I won't take it, that Bronny won't take it two-way, but his quotes about being like, basically that all the nepotism stuff is foolish and that there's, nepotism runs the country and why can't someone like that inherit a spot the way someone could in another industry?
I got to be honest. The clips of his quotes, the media took out of context.
As I'm doing right now.
No. I think you did it right way. You set it up for me to answer the question, and it drove me to go read it because it sounded so ridiculous. And yes, he said things that suggested that he believed that basketball or a position on a basketball team is the same as like someone who owns a business employing their child. That's absurd.
Yeah.
But I think he made a lot of really good points, and that I think gave what he was saying a little bit more context. It felt to me that he's a smart person, and there is one way to interpret that given how much credit he was given to Bronny, and he also acknowledged how tough the situation was. And I think that what he was saying was because of LeBron, Bronny's getting extra attention. That is the way that this world works. And it's weird to all of a sudden say that because Bronny's getting extra attention, that it's unfair. I didn't feel like it was presented as he was saying explicitly, well, he's going to get a job because of LeBron and he deserves it. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think that's what he's saying. He's saying that he's going to get an extra chance. He's going to get an extra look. He's going to get more opportunity because his dad is LeBron. And that's the way the world is. It's still going to be reliant on him to make something of it.
Can I go we'll get back to the basketball part of it, but we were talking about this before the show.
Yeah.
Didn't you used to literally have this argument negotiating on behalf of players?
That's a fair point. So, like, back in CBA negotiating stuff, we'd go against the owners, and they would talk about the growth in franchise value and the value of the league, and as if it was something we should all be proud of. And our pushback was always like, but we don't get to enjoy that because we don't own our roster spot. We can't bequeath our position to our children the same way you can to yours. So, like, what we can make now, like raise the salary cap, and you can keep all that franchise value because we get none of that. What I do find interesting about this is it connects to some other things that we were talking about, but this is a shift that I've been saying is happening in the NBA for a while, and it just makes it really obvious in that the top level stars in the NBA, when I was working at the Union, it was the weirdest thing was like they felt almost closer to ownership than the rank and file players in the NBA. And it feels like that's happening more and more. And this is an extreme version of it. And obviously, I don't think LeBron's going to be able to like give his son a job for eternity, but it does feel like he's a lot closer to an owner, right?
Yeah.
Than he is to a star player.
I mean, he literally might be able to give Bronny the Las Vegas expansion franchise or Rich Paul's agency in clutch.
Yeah.
But from the basketball perspective, one thing that's interesting is like we get more and more scouting reports of does he physically compare to Gary Harris or Davion Mitchell or so-and-so. And yeah, those are undersized two guards who have elite athletic traits and can play good defense. But they were all significantly more effective offensive players in college. Like, I think it's almost strange to be projecting someone who's shown no offensive ability at the college level.
It
like,
also isn't
Yeah.
like the glove. Like, he's a good defensive player. And again, I'm not a basketball scout. This is all based on stuff that I'm reading. But it's not like, you know what? It's not like Gobert where you're like, all right, we'll take that offensive trash because you're so good at defense.
Or like the Davion Mitchell comps. Like, watching that Baylor team that beat Gonzaga in the national championship, seeing Davion Mitchell on the floor, it was like, it felt like how are someone going to get to half court against this guy? Right. Gary Harris was like an all Big Ten player for Michigan State. He was like 17 point per game guy. Like it's normally you get forced into that defensive stopper role because you have other skills that are like somewhat trustworthy, and then you have the physical tools to get get that spot. Like
the thing that I will say that it's offensive to us to hear stuff like that, in part because I think we all accept that sports is the closest thing we have to a meritocracy.
Yeah.
We know that's not a true meritocracy, but this
at least gives the illusion of one.
Right.
It feels like one to the fans. Yeah.
And that's offensive if we're like, hey, this isn't a meritocracy. But the thing about this that I think is a little level deeper that's interesting to me is what's happening to Bronny is no different than anything that happens every year. To me, it's about the unconscious bias and perception that happens. It's why we don't have white cornerbacks.
Yeah.
It's like there are things when you see a person, and it's why, like, if someone succeeds from a particular school at a position, then we're all of a sudden like, you know what? That's linebacker you. And the next linebacker that comes out of that school, we're going to give him a couple extra points subconsciously. It's the same things. Like it just happens over and over again. And I think part of that is happening with Bronny, and it's just really hard because it's maybe more points than you normally give somebody for this. But it's not new. And I think that's the point that Rich Paul was trying to make is like, stop acting like this is new. Like after all, his success is gonna be based on how well he plays.
And to your point, we're really accustomed to drafting the toolsy 6'8" guy. Like there was no doubt about Koulibaly, who now he's apparently 6'9". Who knows? Could be the Wizard stopper. He's still growing. Or like any 7-foot stiff, who gets drafted high in the lottery. It's like teach him how to shoot free throws. Yeah. Can he drop step, make a corner three? Guard, protect the rim. But it's just weird to do that for a 6'2" guy. It feels weird because there aren't 6'2" guards who aren't wizards with the ball.
Yeah, we normally are able to point to something where
real wizards, not watch.
I got you. You're normally able to point to something that you're going to build around, you know? And in this case, the thing that's providing him the boost is that he's the firstborn child of LeBron James, which does not feel like something you can build around. It's not like a particular trait or a particular skill that's like unique where you're like, oh, yeah, he's 6'1", but he handles the ball better than Kyrie Irving. Yeah. Or like he's uncoordinated, but he's 7'1", so we'll figure this the hell out. It's like, hey, he lived with LeBron a whole lot, so you know what? I think Rich Paul made this point. He's not going to go crazy when he gets a little bit of money. It's going to be a pay cut, the contract that you guys start giving him from what he was making before. So I think that was one of the points that Rich Paul made that I thought was funny. But it's also like he's going to be smart. He's going to make good decisions. He's grown up with LeBron. He understands basketball.
I mean, Rich Paul said he won't take a two-way. He's really trying to force him to be an NBA player immediately. Right. And he's trying to steer him into the first round. Do you think a tiny bit of Rich Paul, everyone makes themselves the protagonist in their own story. Mm-hmm. Do you think a tiny bit of Rich Paul's like, LeBron gave me a job and look, he worked out for me.
Yeah. I mean, there are traits that I think we've talked about this a bunch off camera about the traits that can't be measured and how we in sports are going to continue to try to measure them until we actually can. And I think there's something to be said for the stuff that's inside. The problem is, I think Mike Wilbon said this a long time ago. It just always stuck with me. I think it was before I worked at ESPN, was his response to somebody using like want to as analysis is like, want to? I really wanted to be Willie Mays. Like I wanted to be the best, but I mean, there's other skills that you need on top of that are more important than want to. So no matter what Bronny has inside of him, he's going to have some base level of skill to make it work and to make it not a wasted pick. But I guess it's worth, if we keep talking about these draft picks as lottery tickets, then drafting Bronny is a gamble.
Yeah. Let's pivot to some other NBA business. We're on the verge of a new NBA TV deal, which will be, even with smoothing cap, massive new contracts. I think SGA's next contract, the final year, will be just over $80 million in annual salary. We're less than a decade away from $100 million contracts, which means we're going to be less than a decade away from creating a billionaire class of players in the NBA. I mean, whatever, say what you want about taxes, like overall, just net raw career earnings, they're going to be billionaire basketball players, and a lot of them. Yeah.
$100 million annually.
Annually. So 5-year, $500 million deals.
I think, a year. Yeah. Right now, and that's the highest.
Jaylen Brown's 61, I think.
So within the next decade, we're probably going to have guys making $100 million per season.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I can't imagine that when you were working in the union, you thought this was even possible, something that was imaginable, because it seems like you see the number and the sticker shock is insane. And what I'm wondering is, from your perspective, how will ballooning NBA contracts affect player perception and the owner-player dynamic in the NBA?
So first of all, I love it. Like, I think the players are incredibly unique, special gifts that are the reason why the league can be successful and can make the amount of money that it can make. And so if the money is going to go to either the owners or the players, obviously I think all like right-headed individuals recognize that it should go to the players. I'm not naive enough to think that there are negative consequences for every positive thing that happens. And in this case, I think that it is going to impact the difference between the top tier players and the rank and file of the players, which I think undercuts the only leverage that players have, which is the strength and solidarity they have in the union. And I told you when I was at the NBPA, one of the things that I recognized was like the 5 to 10 top players in the NBA. They felt a relationship with the league and a relationship with team owners and a relationship with Adam Silver that was not as antagonistic as the lower players felt, and certainly not as antagonistic as I felt when I was with the NFL, which is not all bad. Like, that's fine. That makes certain things move more smoothly. It makes the league more effective or more nimble in certain ways. So, like, pulling off the bubble. Pulling off the avoiding boycott when we were having George Floyd-related strikes around or boycotts around the country. Like, those things happen in part because there's a trust and a level of relationship between the strongest players in the union and the ownership class. However, through the history of the NBA, they do a great job of maintaining relationships with their greatest players. Their great players become owners. Their great players become coaches. Their great players show up at every All-Star game and participate. They feel like they are getting closer and closer. And the one thing that divides them is like, hey, those guys are working the hell out of us and taking all the money. When we get to a place where that doesn't even divide them, I'm not sure what leverage the rest of the players have to keep from the league doing anything that they want to do, because I'm not going to push back. I'm getting $100 million next year and the year after. Strike? Lockout, whatever they want, I'm giving it to them. And then the rest of the players are like, but what about healthcare? What about this? What about that? What about all these things that we need? And it's just no leverage there.
It's so interesting from that perspective. Do you think that the owners and the star players will get along better when there's less of a divide?
I think that their incentives will be aligned, will be more consistently aligned.
Because right now it feels like there is a pro-player anti-management or pro-management anti-player thing that looms over a lot of professional sports. And if that disappears, I think it'll be, or at least if that shrinks, it'll be really interesting from the fan perspective in certain ways, because I can't imagine the regular fan not being frustrated by the $100 million player who's like, I'm going to take the night off. I got a little migraine, or I just signed my 4-year, $520 million contract. But actually, I want out of here. I signed it because it was the contract I could sign with the Wizards, but I'd rather play for the Knicks.
I don't think that's any different, and I could be wrong, but maybe adding that third figure makes it even more egregious. But I think that fans are just as annoyed if someone makes $25 million or signs a $30 million a year contract, and then the next year is like, I got 2 years on my deal, I want out. I don't think making it 100 makes it. I think the difference for the average fan is still like, you're making more money than I can fathom. So what you're doing is uncomfortable. I don't think that changes that dynamic at all. However, I do think that it does, part of the leverage that forces players to, I hate to use the word like conform, but when players want to demand a trade or demand something, part of the reason why they will not is because like there's a lot of money waiting on them.
Yeah.
And there will still be a lot of money waiting on them, but it's also like, I played for 5 years, or I played for enough to get through my rookie deal, then played for 4 more years. I got $500 million in my account. I'll sit out.
Yeah.
Like, so it might, I think that the restrictions that have been placed into the cap are going to make it a lot more difficult for player movement, but it might give the players a little bit more audacity, which I'm never opposed to.
The thing that I just wonder about the perception of it, because right now it's billionaires pushing around people with a lot less money, and now it'll feel like billionaires pushing around slightly smaller billionaires, which just feels different.
I guess, and this is maybe just my personal bias or from my perception, is I've never felt like the general public was on the players' sides. I've always kind of felt like
they just want their team to win.
Yeah. And I've always... It's always felt to me, and I know in sports media it feels a little different, but it's always felt to me like there's something about the ownership class that we as a society respect and approve of. If you're a certain age, your hair is gray, you wear a suit, and you own a team, we show a bit of deference to them. If you're 25 and you don't connect with a 45-year-old or 50-year-old fan and you're making millions of dollars, I've always felt that even if that player who's 25 or 32 making tens of millions of dollars, I've always felt like the fans look at them, which is absurd, look at them like they deserve it less because they're like, hey, you're playing a game. You like, I would give anything to be you. And you're young. And I think there's some subconscious thing that's happening. This, again, I could be off on this, where there's like some just like respect that we offer to these guys because they wear suits and have gray hair.
It's so interesting.
Except for Mark Cuban because he dyed it.
Yeah. I mean, it's from like the fan perspective, I mean, someone's got to get the money.
Yeah.
I don't really care if it's the owners or the players, but I also think it's just a lot easier to connect with teams that have continuity. Like the fan bases that get to root for those guys for a long time. Like it seems to feel less transient and more authentic with the fan base and the players.
Yeah, you might be right. I guess I just don't hear often. It feels like often I hear people say about players, "He's making this much money." Whenever there's anything, whenever they do anything that the fans don't like, what comes up is how much money they're making. I was going to say
it is a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't always hear that about ownership, but I guess sometimes when owners are looking to like fund a arena or something, then that comes up. So maybe I'm wrong.
And owners are just less public facing and less aspirational.
And
it's
we also
weird.
actually don't know how much money they make.
Yeah. Like the kids don't grow up being like, damn, I want to own this team. Like I want to be Michael Jordan. I want to play for this team. And I think this is weird.
That's fair. No one's jealous of the owners.
Yeah.
I think, no one's like, you want to hit a game winner. You don't want to be in the luxury box when someone else hits a game winner.
Just because you get the Larry O'Brien first doesn't mean it's really yours.
Definitely ain't.
Yeah, I mean, like this is where it's veering towards European soccer territory. Kylian Mbappe was rumored to have the 3-year, $687 million deal with PSG. He's obviously French, and he's going to Real Madrid this summer. Yep. And I think that's something, despite being homegrown, despite being, I don't know, the best French player since Zidane, has been incredibly frustrating, I think, for PSG fans, where it's like, dude, we brought you everyone. You had Neymar, you had Messi, win a Champions League. Yeah. Do it here.
Yeah, I guess so. It's really hard for me when I look at French soccer to feel any sympathy for the French, but I get what
I totally understand. I get soccer.
I get the perception.
Yeah,
that you could have, but it's also like, whatever.
Tough example.
Yeah, it's a tough example. I get your point. It worked. I mean, it actually works often for a lot of NBA franchises too. Like you could look at a lot of these cities and be like, hey, why don't y'all get off my man's back? He just out here trying to make a living.
So do you think that there's people actually laughed at these comments, which is probably progress compared to being frustrated. But Draymond, who's made $177 million, said that the NBA is not set up for players to leave wealthy.
I think he didn't say leave wealthy. He said be wealthy after you're done. I'm looking for any semantic loophole to defend my client Draymond right here, but it's tough. It is tough when you make it. And then the tough thing is he was pointing to fines that are insignificant for the amount of money that he is making. It's a real tough scene. I think he has a better position by saying society in general is not really, because it's a rarity, and there aren't. Yeah, which is something I recognize also. There aren't like programs or processes that are ready to accept or help nurture a 30-something-year-old millionaire who didn't make it in a traditional way.
Yeah.
So, like, any other time you make a lot of money like that, you had a tech company or you moved up or you did something and you've developed some connections, some skills, and you understand that oftentimes what has actually happened when you get really that rich is the nepotism thing that Rich Paul was saying. It's like you came from money. These people know how to work with money. So I think generally American society is not like designed, and the proof is in the pudding from all the documentaries and pieces that we've seen about athletes losing money. It's not designed to help perpetuate it, but it's real tough if you think that you're going to go broke by $5,000 fine at a time, Draymond. That's
one punch at a time.
You love to call out Draymond.
I love Draymond.
I came here. We're recording this on Sunday. I came here from a cookout where a friend of mine had a T-shirt on. It's just a black T-shirt with Draymond on a bicycle looking like Debo.
It's amazing.
It just made me think, like, I want you to make he's a podcaster. See if we can get him on and you can make punch jokes to his face.
That'd be great. I mean, Draymond's a Rorschach test for how you view basketball. Like, when people were claiming like that guy's not good in the 2022 finals, it's like, no, man, you just don't get it. How good the things that he's good
now
at.
you're pivoting to kissing Draymond's after you are insulting him as puncher.
I told you I met Draymond in 2016. Could not have been nicer. Could not have talked to me for like 20 minutes in the tunnel after a Wizards game. Got introduced by Festus Ezelius right after he made his first All-Star game.
Big Festus, yeah.
Okay, last one. A little bit of football.
Oh, love it.
We're in OTAs. We have gotten the fluff reports that every young quarterback or new veteran quarterback on a team, from Kirk Cousins to Jaden Daniels to Bo Nix, they're cooking. In shorts and a helmet, they all look like Patrick Mahomes, except for Caleb Williams, who there have been a ton of critical yikes type of reports. And my question is, does it actually matter that Caleb Williams has reportedly struggled a lot in OTAs?
This is going to sound dumb, but I think it matters if it matters.
Yeah.
And I think that there's only so much goodwill you have around you and patience people will have for you. If he's terrible all the way up until game one, and then he plays average to above average in game one, none of it matters.
Yeah.
If he's terrible all the way up into game one and then he plays poorly, then we got a story. And the reason why we have a story is because of all of this buildup. Because otherwise, I think if it's like, hey, he's good in practice or he's whatever, it's like no comment out of practice up until now. He has a bad game one. The conversation is more like, hey, guys, relax. He's a rookie. He'll be fine. But I do think that it hurts him that way. I think there's also like the more interesting question to me is why.
Yeah.
Because these things tend not to just be like random. And like I recognize why the Drake May stuff came out. They're trying to make sure the expectations are low and prepping to have him sit out the entire season. I understand why all the other conversations are coming out. They're trying to hype up their picks.
Yeah. Jaden Daniels' release looks incredible. Ball doesn't touch the ground type of, yeah.
I get all of that stuff. I don't quite understand why this would come out unless they're trying to lower the expectations for him.
Right.
But I think you run the risk of getting the expectations so low that you set him up to only have or the fans and the commentators to have only a short fuse, which I guess doesn't matter if you're able to withstand the criticism, and he's able to withstand the criticism long enough to get comfortable and get good.
Doesn't it just feel a little weird though? I get lowering the expectations. You don't want people to come in and expect him to be Patrick Mahomes immediately. Mm-hmm. Like that's a ridiculous comp.
Right.
Like we just saw this in the NBA.
But we don't hear this. I don't know. I don't remember the last time I heard this.
I do. It reminds me of Jared Goff's rookie year. It genuinely reminds me, and which is when I saw Caleb play the first time at Oklahoma, I thought I was like, that's the first overall pick. That's one of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen. So that's why it's stunning. Do you remember the reports with Jared Goff when he wasn't playing at the beginning and it was coming out of training camp, and they're like, this guy might never be an NFL quarterback. And obviously he figured it out with McVay and has been excellent in Detroit with a good situation.
He was on Hard Knocks his rookie year, right?
Yeah. Didn't know if the sun set in the east or the west.
Yeah, that was a real tough offseason for my guy. What we have to understand is it's a long time. So the thing that I'm saying is assuming that the reports stay bad.
Mm-hmm.
There's a long time between now and when the season starts, and maybe this might be more foresight than accustomed to for football teams and probably more than is necessary. But what I've recognized, and I think I recognized this before a lot of other people, is that LeBron knows that we're going to talk about him.
Yeah.
And LeBron gives us stories by the things that
little morsels.
Yeah, by the things that he's saying and doing. He's like, all right, I know that after this happens, they're going to have something to say. So I'm going to put on a wrist brace. I'm going to tease retirement. I'm going to flirt with a GM. I'm going to do this because I know that after this event happens, you guys are going to talk about me for 24 hours. I'm going to knock out whatever negative conversations you're going to have by giving you this.
Yeah.
So if they are on next level strategery, then this is how you set expectations for mini camp, for training camp, to build to something when the season starts. As you say, look, and I don't believe this to be the case, but this would be some chest level. They're like, you know what? He's the worst quarterback we ever seen.
It's just weird, too. I mean, like, this happened with Jamar Chase when he couldn't catch the football without stripes his rookie year in OTAs, and obviously he's, like, I don't know, third best receiver in the NFL the first snap he took. But the weird thing about this one is that there are beat reporters and there are reporters who get to watch it. And, like, that's one of the things where it's like, it's not just the team, it's also the guys being like, whoa, why is this guy not looking the way we thought? And he had a weird draft process. He might need to shake off rust. I remember there was a story that he went to Tokyo with his girlfriend for like the 3 weeks before the draft when other guys were like working out. But still, it's like throwing in shorts when you're that guy. Should be a layup.
It does lend some credence to his like out of structure reputation, is that in shorts there are no broken plays.
Yeah.
Like, because you can't scramble. It's just like you hit your back foot and you release the ball, and if the defense is tough for you to read, then no one respects you scrambling out of the pocket. So the best case scenario is he is getting acclimated. Like, he's testing things to figure out, to feel it, and it's going to get better. But yeah, was it 7 interceptions in a row or something like that?
Something like that.
That seems comical. Like that seems hard to do. I think I could do better than that. Like, I would at least have one incompletion in there somewhere. I would be so inaccurate.
Throwing out of bounds.
Yeah, I'd be so inaccurate that someone could not intercept it. Like, it's
just so funny because we have all these reports of Bo Nix looking like the second coming, and we're going to look up and it's going to be week 5, and Bo Nix is going to be terrible, and Caleb's going to be just fine.
Yep. Yeah, well, I appreciate them for giving us this for right now.
A tiny bit of me does think of, I heard Travis Kelce in an interview last year where he was like, they asked him when he knew about Mahomes, and he was like, dude, this practice is right at the beginning. It was like, it took him like a week, and then it was like, oh my God.
I mean, was he talking about OTAs? Because they had a starting quarterback.
Yeah.
So he was there. He had a whole summer and a whole season, frankly. But I think Patrick Mahomes probably would have been pretty good from the jump.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Chance that he'd probably been pretty good, but yeah, it's going to be some growing pains. It's going to be a learning process. We'll see.
Yeah. So much of this feels like it's also the Bears are so accustomed to having quarterbacks flame out that they saw a bad practice and they were like, oh, my God.
We did it again. Anyway, we are not accustomed to have flame out podcasts. Another banger delivered by us. Appreciate it, Charlie. Enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day weekend. Thanks for joining me. Thank you, Podville. I love you. Thank you, all my great producers, for working on a holiday weekend. Shout out to Brian, Kevin, Serafina, Cortez, Megan, and I already said, Podville, I love you. Get well soon, Santos. Oh, rate, review, 5 stars, all that. Share it. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Do it. Oh, yeah, put some questions in the comments, too. Or what are the reviews? Questions in there. Charlie will read them.
Yeah. Tweet us, YouTube comments, anywhere. We'll read them on the show.
We're building something, and we need your help. Bye.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.